Think you know about pirates? You've seen the swashbuckling movies, the charming rogues with witty one-liners, the glorious sword fights, and romantic quests for treasure and freedom. Well, forget everything you think you know. The Hollywood pirate is a lie. The real pirates of the Golden Age were not charming adventurers. They were bloodthirsty, filth-covered terrorists operating out of floating cesspits, whose lives were relentless nightmare, disease, torture, and horrifying violence. You're about to discover why their ships smelled so bad you could detect them from miles away, how they invented gruesome tortures specifically designed to make a man beg for death, and why the average pirate's glorious career lasted less than 2 years before ending in a spectacular display of agony. This isn't a treasure hunt. This is a descent into the horrifying reality of the most brutal criminals to ever sail the seas. Let's start with a pirate ship. Forget the majestic vessel you see in the movies. A real pirate ship was one of the most disgusting places a human could exist. There were no bathrooms. The crew, sometimes over 100 men packed into a tiny space, would relieve themselves wherever they could, often right on the deck or over the side. The stench of human waste, vomit, and stale rum was constant and overpowering. But wait, it gets so much worse. The bottom of the ship, the bilge, was a stagnant pool of oily, black water filled with seawater, rotting food, human filth, and the occasional corpse of a rat. The smell was so toxic that sailors forced to work in the bilge would often pass out from the fumes. And this entire floating garbage dump was infested. We're talking about rats the size of cats and a plague of cockroaches and weevils that got into everything. Your clothes, your bedding, and especially your food. What did a pirate eat? Not roasted pigs and barrels of fresh fruit. Their primary food was a rock-hard biscuit called hardtack. It was so durable that it was often years old and almost always infested with black-headed weevils. Pirates got so used to this that they had a saying, "It's better to eat your biscuits in the dark." That way, you couldn't see what was crawling inside. The meat was no better. It was heavily salted beef or pork, stored for months in barrels. By the time they ate it, it was often green, slimy, and smelled horrific. And fresh water? After a few weeks at sea, it turned slimy and green with algae. Pirates would add rum to it, not just to get drunk, but to kill the taste of the slime. But the real horror was scurvy. This wasn't just feeling a bit unwell. It was a disease that made you rot from the inside out. Your gums would swell up and turn black. Your teeth would loosen and fall out. Old wounds would spontaneously reopen, and you would eventually die in agonizing pain. A pirate's biggest fear wasn't a sword fight. It was a slow, disgusting death from a simple vitamin deficiency. Pirates didn't just kill their enemies. They turned torture into an art form. When they captured a ship, their goal was to terrorize the crew into revealing where the treasure was hidden. One of their favorite methods was called wool ding. They would tie a rope or cord around the victim's head, and then insert a stick. They would then twist the stick, tightening the rope until the pressure was so immense it would literally pop the victim's eyes out of their sockets. Here's a fact that will haunt your dreams. Another preferred method was using lighted matches. They would place matches between the fingers of their victims and light them, slowly burning their flesh down to the bone. They did this to every finger, one by one, until the person talked. And keel hauling? It was a death sentence. They would tie a man to a rope, throw him overboard, and drag him under the ship's hull. The bottom of the ship was covered in sharp, jagged barnacles that would shred the victim's skin and flesh like a cheese grater. If you survived the shredding and the drowning, you were usually just thrown back in the sea to be finished off by sharks. The idea of pirates growing old and retiring on a tropical island is a complete fantasy. The golden age of piracy only lasted for about 10 years, from roughly 1715 to 1725, and the average career of a pirate during that time, less than 3 years. They weren't adventurers seeking freedom. They were desperate, unemployed sailors, ex-Navy men, and criminals who chose a life that was almost guaranteed to be short and end horribly. If disease or torture didn't get them, a rival crew's cannonball would. And if they were captured, the end was the dance upon the gallows. They would be publicly hanged. Their bodies often left to rot in cages at the entrance to harbors as a terrifying warning to other pirates. There was no escape. There was no retirement plan. There was only a brief, violent life followed by a gruesome death. So the next time you see a charming pirate in a movie, remember the reality. A desperate, terrified man, covered in filth, reeking of disease, eating maggot-infested food, and whose only real skills were terror and brutality. They weren't heroes of the sea. They were its nightmares. If this dose of brutal history makes you question everything you thought you knew, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, because the truth is always more horrifying than fiction. A dramatic historical oil painting, in the style of the old masters, painted in a dark, moody, Baroque palette with highly detailed brushwork, evoking the style of Rembrandt or Caravaggio. The main character pointing toward a glowing scroll in the air that says subscribe and like, with a golden bell icon floating beside it. Candles flicker in the shadows as parchment and quills lay across a wooden desk.